before screens, before the printing press, before you could tap a search bar and summon the thoughts of 1,000 minds. There was the quill. Not a pen, not a feathered flourish, but a sharp, carved, serious tool in the hands of a man who had given up everything to write words he might never understand, in a language he barely spoke, for people he would never meet. This is the story of the scribes. Not the poets, not the prophets, not the thinkers, but the quiet, cloistered copyists who carried entire civilizations forward, one page at a time. If just one of them had faltered, if just one manuscript had vanished, we might know far less about who we are today. So let's ask the question, what was it really like to be one of them? To wake in the frozen dark, pull on a scratchy wool habit, and spend your life writing someone else's words in silence, in service, in ink. Let's slow everything down. No flashing timelines, no background music or maps, just the cold floor beneath your feet, the flicker of candlelight, and the sound of a quill scratching against skin. Step into the monastery with me. Let's spend a full day inside a medieval scriptorium, not just watching, being there. From the pre-dawn bell to the last silent prayer, from parchment to pen, from sheep to sentence, from silence to scripture. This isn't just a job, it's a calling, it's a burden, and, in its own strange way, it's an act of rebellion against forgetting. Welcome to a day in the life of a medieval scribe, inside the Scriptorium. Your day doesn't start with the sun. It starts with the sharp, insistent clang of the monastery bell, a sound that doesn't ask permission. It cuts through the chill of night like a blade through fabric, summoning every soul within the stone walls of the cloister to rise. This bell is your clock, your master, your call to obedience. It doesn't ring at your convenience. It rings for the rule. The hour is sometime between 2 and 4 in the morning. You don't know the exact time because clocks, at least the kind you can keep by your bed, don't exist. What you know is this: it's dark, it's cold, and your body protests. Sleep is short in the monastery, often just a few hours broken by a night office of prayer. But there's no grumbling. The bell rings, and you move. You swing your legs off a straw-stuffed mattress. The stone floor bites back. It's not just cold, it's damp with the kind of ancient chill that never quite leaves these walls. Your cell is a small, bare chamber. No comforts, no fire. Maybe a single wooden crucifix above your bed, a worn stool, and a rough chest for your habit. The air smells faintly of candle smoke, dust, wool. You breathe it in without thinking. Your fingers, still stiff from sleep, fumble with your robe. You pull on the thick, scratchy habit, usually dark brown or black wool depending on your order. It itches against your skin, heavy with the smell of lanolin, old straw, and maybe, if the laundry's been done recently, a whiff of lavender or mint from the herb garden. Underneath, a thin tunic and underclothes, nothing warm. Comfort isn't the point. Detachment is. No one speaks. Words are reserved for prayer, and this is the silent hour. Your brothers shuffle from their cells in quiet procession. Feet in leather sandals whisper against the stones. In the candlelit hallway, the shadows are long, flickering with each step. Some monks carry their lamps, others know the way by memory. Every corridor, every turn, every creaking wooden stair is etched into your bones. You head toward the heart of the monastery, the chapel. The rule of Saint Benedict governs every minute of your life, and this is Matins, the night office. Its name comes from matutinem, Latin for morning, though the sun won't rise for hours. The service is long, made of psalms and canticles, sometimes with readings from the early church fathers or hagiographies of saints. You chant the Latin texts, line after line, hour after hour, swaying gently with the rhythm. It's cold in the chapel too. Your breath hangs in the air in thin clouds as you kneel on stone or sit on a wooden bench, back straight, eyes closed or fixed on the altar. The light comes only from beeswax candles, their scent mixing with incense, the deep, spicy smoke of frankincense and myrrh curling through the air. This is the sacred space. This is the monastery's pulse. There's no clock on the wall, but you feel time moving through the ritual itself. One psalm leads to another, a responsory, a reading, then another chant. And when matins ends, depending on the custom of your particular order, it might be followed by lauds, the morning praise, or perhaps a short rest before the first meal. What you eat is simple, by design. Usually, it's yesterday's bread, a bit stale, soaked in watered wine or thin broth. Sometimes there's cheese, especially in monasteries lucky enough to keep dairy herds. On fast days, which are many, it might be just bread and water. You eat in silence, seated beside your brothers in a refectory lined with long wooden tables. One monk reads aloud from scripture or a hagiography, while the rest chew quietly. No idle chatter. Even meals are a kind of prayer. Now the sky begins to lighten, not because of the hour, but because the Scriptorium awaits. There is no such thing as leisure in your day, no lazy mornings, no time to wander. As soon as prayers are done and the humble meal is over, you head straight to the place that defines your role in the monastery, the Scriptorium. But before we follow you there, let's pause and think about what's really happening here. You've already been awake for hours, before the world outside the cloister has even stirred. You've navigated freezing corridors, knelt on stone, spoken only in sacred texts, and eaten food that most nobles would refuse. And this is the normal rhythm. You've chosen this life, or maybe it was chosen for you. Perhaps you were the second or third son in a noble family. Maybe you were given to the church as a boy. Maybe you entered as a novice after a vision, a vow, or a tragedy. Whatever the path, you've taken vows: poverty, chastity, obedience. And within those, a kind of sub-vow emerges, the vow of devotion to the written word. You are not just a monk, you are a scribe. This distinction matters. Not every monk works in the Scriptorium. Many tend the gardens, the animals, the infirmary, the kitchens. But you've been chosen, or perhaps proven yourself, as one of the few to serve as a transmitter of knowledge. You are the living conduit between the ancient world and the future. And what's more, this life is as fragile as the pages you'll soon handle. Scribes burn out, eyes fail, hands cramp, backs twist. It's not a job for the proud or the restless. It's for the meticulous, the patient, the invisible. As you make your way through the stone hallways again, toward the Scriptorium, you pass walls lined with frescoes or icons. Maybe a saint who once copied a gospel in a cave. Maybe Saint Jerome, the translator of the Vulgate, clutching a skull in one hand and a book in the other. They're reminders, visual sermons, that this work is sacred. But still, you're human. Maybe your stomach aches. Maybe you feel the weight of sleep still behind your eyes. Maybe you think about the letter you'll never write, the place you'll never see, the child you'll never father. You don't speak these thoughts aloud, but they live there, buried beneath the chants, folded into the lines of the Psalms. Then, as you turn the corner to the Scriptorium, the world narrows again. No more voices, no more wandering, just the creak of the wooden door and the quiet anticipation of a new day's task. The bell may have started your day, but now it's your hand that takes over. The Scriptorium, Latin for a place for writing, is nothing less than the engine room of civilization. You walk in slowly, the thick wooden door creaking on iron hinges. Immediately, the air changes, colder, stiller, more focused. The hush is so total it feels physical, like you've stepped into a different element. It's not just quiet, it's consecrated, a silence made holy by generations of monks who believed that every word copied here brought the world a little closer to salvation. It's usually a long, narrow hall, or sometimes a series of small cubicles called carrels, built to catch as much precious daylight as possible from high, narrow windows. These windows aren't for decoration, they are the only reliable source of light you'll get all day. No glass, just open slits or horn-paned shutters, letting in a thin wash of gray that never seems quite enough. Fire is the enemy of books, so candles are a risky luxury. You feel the weight of that risk every time your eyes strain to read faint lines, or when winter clouds blot out even the meager daylight. One careless flame, one dropped taper, and months of labor could be ash in seconds. Most monasteries use candles sparingly, maybe one placed high on a stand near a shared desk, maybe none at all. Silence here isn't a suggestion, it's a sacred rule, as absolute as in the chapel. Even your footsteps are hushed. Sandaled feet move across floors lined with rushes or cold flagstone. There's no idle speech, no greetings, no chatter. The rule of Benedict calls for modest, restrained speech at all times, and in the Scriptorium, that often means no speech at all. You communicate with glances, nods, maybe a pointed finger. If someone coughs, several heads turn in quiet reproach. The only sounds are the distant drone of chanting from another wing of the monastery, the occasional snap of a cracked quill being reshaped with a penknife, and the steady rhythmic scratch of a quill on parchment. It's not a comfortable place. There's no ergonomic design here, no cushions, no backrests. Your wooden bench has no padding, and the angled writing desk is just high enough to force you to hunch forward. A 10th century prior famously complained of the physical toll. It dims your eyes, makes your back ache, and knits your chest and belly together. It is a terrible ordeal for the whole body, and yet, every monk here is enduring it willingly. Hour after hour, page after page. Because this is the sacred labor of the mind and hand. On your desk, your tools are waiting. Each one tells a story. A quill, sharpened to a fine point, usually from the flight feather of a goose or swan. It takes practice to shape it just right, angled, notched, and hardened in hot sand. You'll resharpen it dozens of times throughout the day with your penknife, a small blade kept always at hand, not just for shaping, but also for scraping away mistakes. The parchment before you is no ordinary paper. It's skin, real animal skin, painstakingly cleaned, stretched, and scraped into smoothness. Calf skin is the most prized, known as vellum. Goat and sheep are common too. The preparation smells foul at first, lime-soaked, barnyard-scented, stiff, but once ready, it's durable, flexible, and holds ink like nothing else. Then there are your inks. The black comes from oak galls, mixed with iron salts and gum arabic. It has a sharp metallic scent. Other colors are rare and precious. Lapis lazuli from Afghanistan for blue, vermilion from cinnabar for red, and yellow from saffron or arsenic compounds. You handle them like gold, because in many cases, they are. Each tool is a sacred instrument. A broken pen, a blot of ink, a tear in the parchment. Any one of these can ruin hours of work. And ink mistakes aren't easy to fix. You might gently scrape the surface with your knife and polish it with pumice, but some stains remain forever. Some scribes even write marginal apologies to future readers when they know they've left a blemish. You look around at the others in the room. Some are novices, still learning how to form their letters. Their pages are shaky, uneven, their necks tense with anxiety. Others are seasoned scribes, working with the graceful ease of practice, their hands steady even after years. Some are copying scripture. Others are illuminating initial letters with delicate flourishes, and a few are simply staring at a line, lost in concentration. Because this isn't mindless copying, it's physical meditation. Every stroke demands full attention. There's no rushing, no multitasking. You are here to do only this. This space is cold, it's uncomfortable, but it's here that worlds are built. It's here that the past is given a future. Sometimes the texts you copy are the Gospels. Sometimes the writings of St. Augustine or Gregory the Great, or ancient medical texts that even the monks don't fully understand but preserve out of duty. Sometimes it's Virgil or Aristotle, pagan philosophers whose insights are considered valuable if viewed through the lens of Christian truth. There are scribes who can barely read the words they copy. Latin may be familiar in sound, but grammar, syntax, and vocabulary still require training. But reading comprehension isn't the goal. Accuracy is. You're not here to interpret. You're here to replicate perfectly. And that's no small thing. One misplaced letter could change a sentence. One skipped line, and a chapter vanishes. Medieval scribes developed ways to keep track, markings, counts, marginal checks, but errors still crept in. Future scribes would correct them, scribble comments in the margins, or leave them untouched, uncertain what was intended. At times you'll find yourself marveling at the work before you, the way a capital A curves, how the baseline never drifts even after hundreds of lines, the subtle grace of a well-balanced page. The temptation to add a flourish or a joke into the margin grows. Some do, little drawings of rabbits, knights, monkeys, or musical snails. A brief flash of humor in a sea of labor. And there's one more layer to this room that isn't spoken about, but is always felt. The sense of duty beyond death. You know you will never meet the person who reads this book. You don't even know if it will be read. But you write as if someone will hold it carefully 100 years from now. Maybe they'll study it in a cathedral library. Maybe it will be lost in a fire. Maybe it will survive centuries in a forgotten chest. But until then, it's yours to give shape. You sit in this carrel not for fame, not for glory, not even for intellectual satisfaction. You sit here because someone must. Because if no one does, knowledge dies. Culture fades. Truth becomes dust. This is why the Scriptorium exists. Not for comfort, not for praise, but for continuity. It's a fragile thing, this chain of learning and belief. One broken link, one generation without scribes, and whole worlds could vanish. So here you are, quill in hand, ink on fingers, breath fogging in the cold, and still, the only sound is that soft, constant scratching, a quiet resistance against oblivion. The day's work begins when the Armarius, the librarian monk, assigns the text. He is the quiet commander of this operation, half librarian, half taskmaster, and wholly in charge of what knowledge gets copied, preserved, or passed on. Sometimes he speaks softly, handing you a worn codex with a quiet nod. Other times, he simply leaves a marked folio on your desk before you arrive. There's no discussion. He decides what gets copied. You obey. It might be a copy of the Gospels, the writings of a church father, or even a pagan work by Virgil or Cicero, saved for its literary beauty. You might be copying a text in Latin or Greek, sometimes without even being fluent in the language. Your job isn't to interpret, it's to replicate perfectly. And that word perfectly sits heavy in the air. You know the stakes. These aren't just words. These are scriptures, laws, knowledge. One wrong line can alter doctrine, confuse a reader, or lead a soul astray. If you forget to copy a verse of the Psalms, some future monk may pray a little less. If you transpose the wrong plant in a medicinal manuscript, someone might misdose and die. This is labor with weight. Your canvas is parchment or vellum, the specially prepared skin of a calf, sheep, or goat. Making it is a disgusting, smelly, and laborious process of soaking, scraping, and stretching that takes days. Raw hides are soaked in lime pits until the hair slips off, then scraped clean with curved knives on a wooden frame. The hides are then tensioned and dried, rubbed with pumice to smooth them, and trimmed to size. Each page is slightly different. Some still bear faint hair follicles or scars from the animal's life. The final product is a durable, creamy surface that is incredibly expensive. A single, large Bible could require the skins of hundreds of animals, a whole flock. Every page is a treasure before you've even written a single word on it. And so, before you ever dip your pen, you breathe deeply. You place the parchment before you like an offering. You inspect it for imperfections, thin spots, holes, blemishes. If you find one, you must work around it, adjusting your layout without wasting precious material. You rule the page with faint, pricked lines to keep your script straight. Some monasteries use a stylus to lightly score horizontal lines. Others use thread or lead plummets to guide the layout. You may prick the margins with a knife to set bounds. Every letter must sit in its place, neither crowding its neighbors nor floating away. Then, the real work begins. Dip, write, breathe, repeat. Each letter is a careful, controlled stroke. You might be writing in Carolingian minuscule, elegant, legible, born in the time of Charlemagne to unify Christian Europe, or perhaps you're trained in the more angular Gothic script, dense and tight, its black blocks crowding the page like bricks. Your style depends on your region, your order, your time. But, style aside, your focus must be absolute. One slip, and the mistake lives forever, or must be painfully scraped away with your penknife. A moment of distraction, a shiver from the cold, and you could ruin an entire page. Or worse, miss a line entirely. It's called homeoteluton, a copying error where your eye skips from one line to another that ends similarly. Every scribe fears it, every armarius watches for it. A good scribe might only complete a few pages in a single day. On difficult texts, one page is an achievement. Some days the work flows, your letters are crisp, the ink runs smooth, your hand moves like it belongs to the page. Other days nothing cooperates. The ink blotches, the pen splinters, your back burns, your thoughts drift. You catch yourself rewriting the same line twice. You scrape it off, smudge the parchment, and curse under your breath. Then you pray, because for all the toil, this isn't just copying, it's a form of spiritual warfare. Cassiodorus, a 6th century statesman who founded a monastery, put it best. He wrote that the scribe's work was a blessed purpose, to preach to men with the hand, and to fight with pen and ink against the unlawful snares of the devil. And he meant it literally. For Satan receives as many wounds as the scribe writes words of the Lord. You are, quite literally, preaching with your hands. There's something oddly empowering about that. You're not speaking, you're not leading, you're not even creating original thought, but you are preserving, you are transmitting. Every word you copy survives because of you. You are the last hand in a long chain that stretches from antiquity to the unknown future. but the body is weak. Your back screams from hunching over. Your eyes strain in the shifting light. Your fingers cramp. Your knees ache. And it's in the margins of these beautiful manuscripts that we find proof of the human being behind the script. Little notes, scribbled for their eyes only, have survived for centuries. I am very cold. The parchment is hairy. This is a difficult hand to read. Thank God it will soon be dark. And my favorite, scrawled at the end of a massive book. Now I've written the whole thing. For Christ's sake, give me a drink. These are the voices that echo across time, reminding us that behind every page was a person just trying to get through the day. Some scribes even drew doodles. Rabbits jousting, monks battling snails, dogs chasing dragons, not out of rebellion, but relief. A flash of humor in the gloom, a wink across the centuries. And when the work becomes too much, you stop, not to rest, but to pray. You stand, stretch your legs, and step into the cloister for a moment of walking meditation. Beneath the arches, the cold air feels like a slap. You listen to the wind in the hedges, the soft trickle of the fountain. Maybe you recite a psalm under your breath, maybe you don't, but then you return. Always you return. Back to your seat, back to your quill, back to the page, because this is what you've been called to do. Not because it's easy, not because it's fun, but because it matters. Because without you, knowledge slips through the cracks. Without you, the voices of saints and poets and kings fall silent. Without you, the light dims, so you write. One word at a time, one soul-saving sentence after another, one breathless, aching, ink-stained day at a time. Often your work is just the first step. You may have just spent days or weeks copying a single book of the Bible, or the teachings of St. Augustine, or a medical treatise from Galen. Your eyes are red, your knuckles stiff, but the task isn't done, not even close. Once the pages or folios are filled, they're passed to someone with a different kind of gift, the illuminator. The illuminator is part monk, part artist, and part alchemist. He's someone who paints not to decorate, but to glorify, to make divine truths shine visibly, literally, on the page. You see, these books aren't just texts, they're vessels of sacred light. The word illuminare in Latin means to light up, and that's exactly what these artists did. They didn't just copy beauty, they created it. Through pigment, gold, and unthinkable patience. These pictures are called miniatures, not because they're small, though they often are, but from the Latin minium, a red lead pigment often used in decoration. The name stuck, the art evolved, and suddenly the margins of scripture were alive with color and meaning. Imagine opening a manuscript and seeing a large, glorious capital I stretching down half the page, curved into vines, flanked by birds, wrapped in gilded halos. Every stroke had to be precise, every color had to speak. The colors themselves were born from earth, plant, and insect. Blue came from lapis lazuli, mined in Afghanistan, shipped across continents, more expensive than gold. Only the most sacred pages deserved it, like the Virgin Mary's robes. Red came from vermilion, ground cinnabar, or from crushed kermes beetles. Green from verdigris, copper salts, sometimes toxic to the touch. Gold was gold, actual gold leaf, beaten so thin you could see through it. To apply it, the illuminator would use a brush made from squirrel hair, dampened slightly to pick up the wafer-thin leaf, then press it gently into a glue base called gesso. A breath too strong could blow the gold away. A brushstroke too hard could tear the parchment. They painted in layers, building color, shade, and dimension, each image a miniature cathedral in its own right. Sometimes scenes from scripture, like the Annunciation or the Crucifixion, would be framed into the text. Other times, the margins were filled with symbolic creatures, lions, peacocks, stags, dragons, each with its own meaning, each hand-drawn and painted with monastic patience. To us, they look decorative, but in a world where most people couldn't read Latin, images were scripture. Illumination wasn't just embellishment, it was translation, it was revelation. And yet, even these illuminated masterpieces weren't books, Not yet. Once the scribe and illuminator had done their parts, the work passed into the hands of someone just as vital, but often forgotten: the binder. The binder's job was to turn a collection of flat, vulnerable parchment leaves into something strong, lasting, and portable: a book. It began with the quires, groups of 4 or 5 folios folded together. The binder would arrange them in order, stack them carefully, and begin the long, delicate task of sewing. Using strong thread, often linen waxed with beeswax, the binder would stitch through pre-punched holes in the center folds of the quires, sewing them around leather cords or parchment thongs that ran horizontally across the spine. These cords gave the book its strength. They also dictated how flexible the spine would be. Once sewn, the book block was pressed between boards, usually thick slabs of oak, sometimes beech, and secured. Then came the covering. Leather, tanned and softened, was soaked, stretched, and wrapped tightly around the boards. The leather could be left plain, or it could be tooled, pressed with heated stamps to leave geometric or floral designs. Some books had clasps to keep them closed, or chains to tether them to a lectern. But in wealthy scriptoria, or in royal commissions, the cover might be something else entirely. Ivory plaques carved with biblical scenes, or precious stones set in gold and silver frames. The Lindau Gospels, for instance, has a cover encrusted with garnets, emeralds, and pearls. These weren't books. They were relics, icons. What you're left with isn't just a book. It's a sacred object that represents thousands of hours of devoted labor. It's not the kind of book you tuck under your arm or flip through casually. It's heavy. It smells of age and earth, parchment, ink, leather, wax. Its pages rustle like dry leaves, but they don't crumble, they endure. And here's the thing: most of the people who used these books never owned them. These weren't personal possessions. They belonged to a library, a church, a community. A single Bible might take years to produce. It might cost the equivalent of a farm. It might outlive its creators by centuries. Even reading it was a kind of ritual. A monk might approach the lectern slowly, lift the chained book's wooden cover with both hands, and lean in to read aloud for the daily lessons. He might only read a few lines. He might mispronounce them. But the point wasn't speed or fluency. It was continuity. Every time a word was read or heard or spoken, it echoed the labor that brought it into being. And for you, the scribe, the satisfaction wasn't in fame. Your name often isn't even included in the book, but in this: that your work became part of something lasting, something physical, something holy. There were no shortcuts, no mass production, no guarantees. Every book was a survival story. Every finished volume a miracle. And even then, after binding, a book wasn't truly finished. It might be copied again in another century. It might be read aloud in 1,000 voices. It might be locked away during a war, hidden behind a wall, rediscovered by candlelight, cataloged by hand, photographed by scholars, digitized for the internet. But none of that happens unless your quill scratched the page first. So while the world outside marched on, while kingdoms fell and borders changed and empires burned, inside the Scriptorium, inside the binder's workshop, a different kind of war was being fought. A quiet war for memory, a slow fight against forgetting. You may never hold your finished book again. It will be passed along, read by others, perhaps damaged, maybe repaired. But it is no longer just yours. It belongs to history now. Just as a bell started the day, a bell ends it. It doesn't matter what you're doing or where you are in your work, whether you're tracing the delicate tale of a letter, fixing an error in a margin, or halfway through a psalm. When the bell tolls for Vespers, the rule is clear: you stop immediately. There's no just a minute, no finishing the sentence. The bell isn't a suggestion, it's obedience made audible. You lift your quill, you blot the ink, you breathe, and that's it. The work for today is done, not completed. just done. There's a difference. In the Scriptorium, you learn to live with the unfinished. You come to accept that every task worth doing will outlast your strength. No manuscript is ever copied in a single day. No book is ever bound in one sitting. Your work moves in slow increments, passed from hand to hand, from hour to hour, like a candle lit across generations. But for now, you clean up. Your first duty is to tend to the tools themselves, because they are not disposable. They are valuable, delicate, and, in their way, sacred. You carefully wipe your quill, checking its tip for splinters, then set it aside to dry. Your penknife is sheathed and returned to your pouch. The ink pots, which could spill with a single careless movement, are corked and placed back in their boxes. Some ink may still be usable tomorrow. Other pots, especially red or green pigment, may need to be refreshed or strained. You gently lift the parchment sheets you were working on and stack them flat, ensuring nothing creases or warps in the night air. If your monastery is well supplied, the pages are stored in wooden trays or between smooth boards to prevent curling. If not, they're bundled with cloth ties and placed in locked chests, because mice are a danger. So is damp. So is fire. So is theft. The Scriptorium is quiet during this routine, but the silence feels different than it did in the morning. Then, it was sacred, focused. Now, it's weary, a bit heavier. You hear it in the slow clack of inkpots being closed, in the quiet creak of benches pushed back, in the deep breath you didn't know you were holding. There's no applause, no praise. Just the knowledge that the day's work, however much or little, exists now. The words are on the page. The ink has dried. Something survived. And that, in the monastery, is everything. You walk out of the Scriptorium and back into the colder halls. The air smells of stone and wax. Maybe bread baking somewhere for tomorrow's meal. You pass fellow monks, some heading to the kitchen, others to the garden, some to their own quiet corners of prayer. You don't speak. There's nothing to say. You all heard the same bell. You all felt the same ache. Now comes Vespers, the evening prayer. You return to the chapel as you did before dawn, but the energy is different now. Less braced, more grounded. The chanting is slower, the candles lower, the incense curls lazily. It's the same Latin psalms, maybe Psalm 141 or the Magnificat, but they feel gentler, worn in. You kneel again on the cold floor. You close your eyes. You chant what you know by heart. The rhythm soothes your thoughts. The words don't have to be understood to be meaningful. You're not praying for reward. You're praying out of rhythm, because the day breathes in prayer. The morning was for strength. This hour is for rest. After Vespers comes supper, a simple meal like the one at dawn. Perhaps warm lentils or boiled greens, bread dipped in broth, or occasionally fish if the monastery is near a river. No meat. The Benedictine rule forbids it for monks. Wine is watered down and always portioned carefully. You eat in silence, not just out of discipline, but out of fatigue. One monk reads aloud from scripture or a sermon, while the rest chew slowly. The voice echoes through the refectory, bouncing off the stone. You listen, not because every word registers, but because the act of listening itself is part of the offering. Then, after supper, you might attend Compline, the final prayer service of the day. Shorter, simpler. It closes the monastic day the way a lullaby closes childhood. Psalms of protection, forgiveness, and rest. Into your hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit. Keep me as the apple of your eye. Hide me under the shadow of your wings. And finally, the great silence begins. From this moment until the next morning bell, no one is permitted to speak at all. No whispered jokes, no complaints, no conversations in passing, not even greetings. You walk to your cell in silence. You wash your hands with cold water. You pull off your habit. You sit quietly on your straw mattress, letting your body exhale into the stillness. If you're not too tired, you might recite a psalm by memory in the dark, or trace a cross on your chest, or simply lie back and let the day slip from your hands. You've earned no money, gained no title, made no grand decision. You've written words you didn't invent. You've obeyed rules you didn't write. And yet, your work may outlive empires. What you copied today may be read 100 years from now. It might survive fire, war, pestilence, decay. It might sit in a glass case in a museum, or lie unopened in a chest in a forgotten priory. It may be studied, it may be loved, or it may disappear. But it was done, and done faithfully. That's the only measure that matters. As you lie down, the stone walls around you seem to hum faintly. You can still feel the quill in your fingers. Your back still aches in the shape of the desk, but there's a quiet peace settling into your bones. You did your part in a chain longer than memory. You gave the world one more page. Tomorrow, the bell will ring again, and you'll rise and begin again. To be a scribe was to live a paradox. It was a life of silent, solitary work that was also a deeply communal act. It demanded almost inhuman discipline, yet it preserved the most human things: words, wisdom, memory, prayer. It was physically punishing, yet spiritually vital. It required mechanical precision, but it was one of the most important creative forces in the world. You were anonymous by design, yet essential by consequence. The world outside the monastery walls might never know your name, but without you, it wouldn't know its past. Here's the thing: no empire, no church, no library, none of them could survive without the invisible, aching hands of a scribe. These weren't writers, they were repeaters, carriers, living memory. In their cramped script and aching posture, you find one of the most stubborn acts of devotion in history. They weren't trying to become remembered. They were trying to keep others from being forgotten. And that's what makes it so powerful. Because the final product is never just a book. It's a wound in time, sealed with care. It's a prayer written in muscle and breath. It's a survival story, bound in leather. The beauty of a medieval manuscript isn't just in the gilded margins or the delicate flourishes. It's in the stubborn belief that knowledge matters enough to hurt for, that truth is worth copying by hand, that wisdom is worth slowing down for. Their ink may have faded, their names lost, their backs long since turned to dust, but their work endures. Every illuminated capital, every psalter, every copy of the Gospels, they all trace back to someone who sat in a cold stone room in silence and kept going, because somewhere in their hearts they believed the world needed these words. And if they didn't write them, who would? So now let me ask you, if you had to spend your life copying just one text, one single work, by hand, with care and devotion, what would it be? Would it be a sacred scripture, a poem, a scientific discovery, a diary, a spell book? Let me know in the comments. I want to know which words you believe are worth preserving when everything else is stripped away. And of course, if you'd like more stories from forgotten rooms, quiet corners, and long dead voices, be sure to subscribe to the still past. Because sometimes, the slowest stories are the ones that last longest. Somewhere right now, in a museum drawer, or the archive of a university, sits a manuscript written by hand in the 12th century. The ink has browned, the margins are worn. There's a small note in the corner, maybe in Latin, maybe in Greek, that reads something like, "My hand is tired, my back aches, but the Lord sees all." And He did, and so do we. Thanks to that scribe, we still know those words. Thanks to thousands like him, we have a history to remember at all. So the next time you open a book, any book, pause. Imagine the hand that made it possible, and let yourself feel a little grateful for the ones who copied, not for credit, but for love. Good night, travelers, and sweet dreams.